What a wonderful treat to have Julian's baby snore with us. That's good. Any better than that? Maybe a child song. Shout out to parents. It's a lot of work and worth it. At the end of the sutra opening chant, each week we say, may we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. And Tathagata is another word for Buddha. Buddha means an awakened one, and Tathagata means the thus come one, or one who comes in suchness. Suchness is a kind of Buddhist lingo. It means just as it is. So one that comes just as they are. This is one of the epithets of the Buddha. So may we unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. May we unfold the meaning of the thus come one's truth. The truth of what it means to come just as you are, just as it is. The meaning, maybe we could say significance. Notice that this line doesn't say, may we unfold the Tathagata's truth. It says, may we unfold the meaning or the significance of the Tathagata's truth. The reason there is because the Buddha's truth is already unfolded. It's already everywhere all the time. That's the kind of Buddhist understanding. And so our job is to unfold its significance. And what that means is to unfold it through our life. How does it live through me? How does it live through my life, my family's life, my community's life, society's life? How is the truth moving through all of that? That's what we endeavor to do in practice. That's what meditation is about. That's what all the teachings are about, etc. And so this morning we'll have a chance for some questions and response. I always say question and response rather than question and answer, because the last thing I want to do is answer your question, because that's your key. That's actually the lock and the key to uncovering the significance in your life of the Buddha Dharma, is to follow your questions wholeheartedly. So I will do my best not to answer them, but simply to respond. So for those of you who are been in the assembly many times, you know how it goes. But those of you who are new, I'd really encourage you. Anything is okay to ask, and just put your hands together and then say Hojo-san, and then you can ask your question. And if two people collide in your time of asking, then one person back off. If you're more senior, it's your job to back off. There are many wonderful cookies. We could just go for that.
You wrote on my tracksuit, listening to the dragons roar. What is the dragons in Buddhism?
Yeah. Could you show the assembly the back of your rock suit?
Yeah.
Just so they can see what you're talking about. This is a rock suit that was sewn for Tenkan in January as a Sangha elder. And so we had a ceremony for that a few weeks ago, and then I inscribed on the back. So that character there is a character for dragon, a very stylized way of writing the character dragon in Chinese, and then a little poem. So dragons are very important in Asian culture in general, and I would say particularly in Buddhism. There are many, many legends about dragons. Oftentimes a dragon is also referred to as a naga, which is a kind of serpent being. So naga, serpent, dragon, they're all the same thing. In China, we tend to say dragon more. China, Japan, Vietnam, Korea. And in South Asia or Southeast Asia, they tend to talk more about Nagas. But that's not not the 100%. We can kind of think of them as the same thing. One of the oldest legends about Nagas is after the Buddha's awakening, and he was sitting under the Bodhi tree, and there's this great attack by Mara, who's the personification of ignorance and deception. And the great Naga king comes up from the earth. I can't remember that Naga's name. Comes up from the earth and spreads his hood over top of the Buddha. So sometimes you'll see an image of the Buddha. It's very common where there's a Buddha sitting very straight, and there's this snake, a serpent, with their hood open, covering the Buddha and protecting them. And from that time, the dragon or the serpent or the Naga, as a protector of the Dharma, became a very important legends. Another important legend about Nagas is their capacity to hold the subtle Dharma at a time when humans were not yet ready for it. And so we say that the Shakyamuni Buddha taught the Dharma to humans in one way, but then entrusted to the Nagas these deep and profound teachings, the teachings that we now typically refer to as the Prajnaparamita teachings, the teachings of wisdom. So when we chant the Heart Sutra at our assembly, that would be an example of a Prajnaparamita text. And those texts lived with the Nagas for many hundreds of years until the great teacher Nagarjuna, Naga, Arjuna, Naga means serpent or dragon. Arjuna is like hero. He was quite intimate with dragons, and he went to the dragon palace at the bottom of the ocean, received those sutras and brought them into the human world because we were ready for them then. Another of my favorite legends about dragons is she's usually called the Dragon Princess in English, and she shows up in the Lotus Sutra, also some other places. She's an acolyte of Avalokiteshvara, who's a Bodhisattva of compassion. And in that scene in the Lotus Sutra, one of the Buddha's disciples, Shariputra, is just very disbelieving of this explanation that all beings can be awakened in an instant. Manjushri is explaining this, and Shariputra is like, come on. And so who shows up is the Dragon Princess. She comes out of the ocean. It's a really beautiful scene in the Lotus Sutra, and she emerges from deep in the sea and comes out to the assembly that's there, and she walks to the Buddha and she holds up the precious jewel, which is what the dragons are always, it's their treasure. Dragons have to have treasure, right? So these dragons have a treasure. It's a gem. It's a gem which gives the power of Buddhahood. It is the gem of awakening. And she comes forward and she hands the gem to the Buddha, sometimes as a pearl. And then she transforms into a massive celestial Buddha right before their eyes in a moment. And this is kind of a teaching to Shariputra about all of the hangups that people typically have. First of all, massively patriarchal society and situation. So she's a girl of 8 is usually how she's described, which is a magic age for any of you who have been blessed to either be a girl of 8 or to be around the girls of 8. I think that's just like 7, 8. It's just like magic, There's something about that in the sutra that really I think is beautiful. And she becomes quite a hero within East Asian culture. She shows up in a lot of places, and now in anime and places like that. The Dragon Woman or Dragon Girl, she's usually called. Anyway, there's legend upon legend. They're also, the dragons, we can say they symbolize the elemental forces of existence. So they're oftentimes just flying through the sky, or they're deep in the water, or in the earth, and they have that kind of quality. They're protectors. So when Dogen Zenji traveled to China, he was the founder of this particular school in Japan. When he was traveling in China, he was studying diligently, and at one of the monasteries he visited, this monastery called Mount Ashoka Monastery, there was a protector deity there, Daigen Shuri Bosatsu, the Bodhisattva Daigen Shuri, who is here to the Buddha's left on the side. And that dragon or that serpent encircled that mountain where the monastery was. That's usually the understanding, is that the dragon circumambulates the mountain and is its protector and also its spirit. And that dragon helped Dogen copy the Blue Cliff record in one night. It was quite a text. I mean, Dogen was quite a brainiac, but still one night is a little quick. And he helped him copy it, and then he returned, an emanation of him returned with Dogen on the ship to Japan as a white snake, and became the protector, one of the protector deities of Eiheiji Monastery that Dogen founded. There's a great mountain there at Eiheiji called Hakusan, which means white mountain. It's beautiful. I was able to see it in January. I had never seen it. I'd seen it once before, but I'd never seen it quite like that from afar. Beautiful mountain. And so there's also a dragon that encircles that mountain. That's another protector of the school. Anyway, many legends. One thing I would say, in modern day, we have kind of two ways to miss the point. Well, actually, we have lots of ways to miss the point. We have two like main flavors of missing the point. One is to try to literalize, right? And in the literalization, then mostly these days the question is like, well, it can't be true, right? Like if you think in a literal mindset, well, it can't be true. I've never seen a dragon. I've never seen a photograph of a dragon. Nagas, what are you talking about? So we literalize it, and then it just kind of falls apart. And then what we're left with is like dragon movies and stuff, which I super love, but are not, they're entertainment, and it's harder for them to touch us deeply. But another way that we miss the point is, rather than relating with the dragon itself, we tell ourselves a story about it standing for something else. So we say something like, the ocean is our mind, and the deep places of our mind is where those sutras resided. That's fine. It's okay that some of that kind of teaching is important. It helps us get more flexible about the way we use our consciousness, right? We say, yeah, there's places within my being. I mean, there's a whole ocean inside of you. I don't even know technically if it's inside, right? But there's a whole ocean that is your mind. And there's all kinds of places, unfathomable depths to that ocean. And so something like a legend about dragons that live at the bottom of the sea tell us about the possibility of places that we don't normally see. The way we miss the point there, though, is if we try to reduce it. We try to reduce the dragon, the legend of the dragon, to, well, dragons are just about deep mind. And then you don't get to meet a dragon. All you get to meet is you're relating it to a human, kind of explanation of what it is. And so that's why I really encourage people to meet dragons. You have to figure out what that is. And your meeting of the dragons will be your meeting of the dragon. For some people will be more visual. For some people will be more emotional. For some people will be more intellectual. It's fine. And but respect that the dragon is real. But by real, I mean essentially true. And that we can the Dharma is guarded by them. And so we have to listen for their roar.
It's funny though that the dragon in English is totally negative.
Yeah. Well, there could be a lot of talk about that. I would say, especially with the emergence in Western civilization of a certain kind of dogmatic allegiance to the light, that dragons become enemies because they're not, they're in the depths, or they're flying in the sky, and they're powerful, but they don't play by the simple rules of good and evil. And that's one of the things I really love about them, because the vibrancy of life is so easily shut down by our heroic mindset about, of course, I'm going to have the sword that is luminous and true, right? How do I know? Because it's my sword. If that's the way you're thinking about things, you're going to have to kill some dragons. because they're not gonna conform to the arrogance of your, you know, your kind of righteousness. And so, not that there hasn't been, you know, plenty of righteousness and problems in Asia too. That's all there, but it's something Buddhism has safeguarded, and been safeguarded by. So please listen to the dragon. Let us know what you hear.
Following that one, could you talk a little bit about the disaster averting Dharma that we do, and especially very loud out on the patio,
Yeah, morning service.
and as fast as we can say it, and are we?
Yeah. So Dharani, and we chant in the morning, like the service that we did this morning, we chanted the great compassionate heart Dharani. That term Dharani, most people know the term mantra. And mantra is like a sacred sound. A mantra, technically speaking, usually is in relationship to some Buddha or Bodhisattva, or particularly quality of illumination, something like that. In a Dharani, we could kind of think of as a longer type of a mantra, and it's maybe related with a particular, particular quality. So the great compassionate heart Dharani that we chant we all chanted, how long ago was it? An hour ago? 45 minutes ago? That Dharani is a Dharani that comes from sutras about Avalokitesvara, who is the Bodhisattva of compassion. And in the texts that were received at the bottom of the ocean by Nagarjuna, there is this explanation of Avalokitesvara's power, and that Dharani is taught. And the Dharani is a kind of incantation that manifests and awakens that teaching through us. It's not a rational teaching. That's why it's kept in the original sound. So when we chant Namu Karatan no Torayaya, that's Sanskrit, was its old version of Sanskrit. And then the Chinese, if you say it nicely, you say they transliterated into Chinese the Sanskrit. If you say it in a not nice way, you say they mispronounced the Sanskrit in Chinese. And then the Japanese transliterated and or mispronounced the Chinese, and then we mispronounce the Japanese. So there's our way of pronouncing, the Japanese way of pronouncing, the ancient Chinese way of pronouncing the ancient Sanskrit. So so those sounds that you're hearing, they're not, again, translations. Transliteration means the sound is cared for, because that's what's important in those incantations, not the meaning. So we chant those Dharanis as a way, again, to awaken and recognize, wake up the teaching of that incantation. The Shosaimyo Kichijo Dharani, or the disaster averting Dharani, is a protector Dharani, and it has to do with the light. It has to do with fire and light. That there is a complete combustion that we call the world. Not only what we see as fire or we see as disaster, but there's like everything that's happening is combustion. You're waking up in the morning, you're brushing your teeth, you're taking a shower, you're going to work, you're taking your kids to school, whatever you're doing, that's all fire. It's just combustion. And that combustion is a miraculous light. The light of our consciousness, the light of awakening. And so we chant that mantra as a way to vivify the light, which is what protects us from difficulty or disaster. Although my experience says it doesn't protect us from worldly disaster. It doesn't protect us from bad things happening. Exactly. It protects us in a deeper way. You know, what makes something bad? There's a lot about how we encounter it. So in the morning service on weekday, we have morning service here every day, and it's a little bit longer than the one we do on Sunday. And then when we finish, we go out on the Engawa here, and there's a very vigorous chant, and it's dedicated to the protector spirit of the temple, whose name is Idaten. And Idaten is an ancient general from southern Asia who became a protector of the Dharma, and then his spirit has traveled with the Dharma for 2,500 years, 22,000 years, and is venerated, particularly in Zen temples, and is the god of hot water and fire and protector of the temple. And so we chant very vigorously. You know, I oftentimes think about, like, if when you're boiling water, all the atoms are going, like, and they're doing it faster and faster. So when we chant that, that's what we're doing too. You know, we don't say no mo samanda moto. No, that's not hot water, right? No mo samanda moto. So we chant in that way.
Focus on. I really caught on when you said earlier dogmatic allegiance to the light, and I've been thinking a lot about the importance of darkness.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it is 3 years plus or so of pandemic, and part of it is, I think, you know, I'm probably closer closer to the end of my life in certain ways. I'm hoping I've got 30 more years. That's what I'm hoping for. I just feel like, yeah, thank you. I'm imagining myself toddling over here at 96 to sit zazen in the morning. But I think I just want to hear more about the darkness. We blow it off. Yeah. And we don't want it. We think it's bad and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we do. You know, there's a lot of ways to talk about this, and you know, we could just do a whole year of study or a whole lifetime of study on it. But one thing I could point out to notice is embedded in the way we perceive things is this essential problem that our consciousness is occupied by what we are perceiving, whether that is external or internal, whatever it is, whatever phenomena are emerging. That's what we pay attention to through consciousness. Right? Am I saying something that's just super obvious?
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's okay.
It's supposed to be super obvious,
exactly.
but then I'm going to point out why it's kind of a mistake, is because that's not all there is. In fact, it's not even close to a smidgen of what is. That little window in your head is like a pinprick. It's nothing. It's wonderful. It's life, but it is just it's like looking through a straw. And so because we cling to the things that we perceive, this is why in Buddhism sometimes it sounds so negative when in Buddhist teachings, where they're like, you have to let go of everything, you have to get rid of all this stuff, you have to not be attached to all this stuff, and it sounds so negative. But a lot of what that teaching about is just like we cling to everything that's inside what we can see, and our life becomes rigid, and our spirit becomes rigid, and our capacity to see gets calcified in that little pinprick. So right in the way that you're looking, and this is one of the things, or maybe we could say the thing that we're practicing in Zazen, is we're not denying what appears, but we're taking the frame off. And everything that's outside that frame we conventionally call dark. And dragons live there,
right?
And so we're kind of scared of it. And the more that our karma is such that we live in some fear of the unknown, what might happen, that could be for a lot of reasons. It's not our fault. It's not about fault that we're like that. It's just how we are. We cling more to the things that can be seen, or that we think can be seen. And we build bigger walls to not have to travel in those other places, or to have things show up from there. So in meditation, when we sometimes you'll find this, you sit down quietly and you're like, oh, this stuff just comes up, right? Well, a good sign that you're probably keeping it out of the pinprick all the time. So it's really important that we make space for that. Now, it doesn't mean we need to force ourselves into the darkness. That's not the point.
Right.
But that we take off layers of that kind of protection as we're ready to. And as we do that, then there's an ease with the darkness that emerges. And and what can be seen and what can't be seen, what can be identified and picked out, and what lives in murky waters or is of the nature of not being seen, all can be part of our life. And you know, particularly facing death, you know, if you think about the deep challenge of death, is that there is something, there is someone, and then there isn't that someone.
Right.
And if you only are grasping to what can be seen, you're crushed. And that's true moment to moment. Actually, when we see each other only as what can be seen, we're crushing ourselves and others. We don't have to wait to die to do that,
Right.
to crush each other and ourselves. So we want to be able to not just see each other as what we think we are. We both are what we think we are, and we're not what we think we are. So yeah, highly recommend. Here's the thing you can do.
Yeah.
If you don't feel like, some people have a trauma around this, and then it's not, I don't recommend you do it. You know, find your way with it, but actually hang out in the dark. I mean, in a very physical way, like turn the lights out, or just have a little bit of light. Don't illuminate things so much that you're like, I can't see, I feel nervous. Just like do a little, you know, ask your neighbors if they'll turn off their front light porch light, and just be in the dark a little bit. And then you can find how the shadow is your friend. In the shadow can bring all kinds of things to your awareness that you don't get when everything's spotlighted.
It can be really scary. I'm just thinking about one of the last times I went backpacking. You're in the dark.
Yeah.
And I saw something, I don't know what it was. I couldn't even explain what, but I just sat up and screamed. And people were like, what's wrong? I'm like, I don't know, you know. I saw something. There was some little thing moving around in my tent or something. I don't know what it was.
So this is one of the people who care about this, and they're, you know, I don't want to say study it in a clinical way, although there's probably some people who study it in a clinical way, is probably largely one of the reasons that we've lost access to relating to dragons and other types of beings, which are not real in the kind of materialist way, but have their own truth and reality. Because everything is so fully illuminated, that's what we pay attention to.
Right,
and then those other things can't be paid attention to. So yeah, camping.
One way to do it.
Hi.
Can you offer some guidance around formulating a question?
Oh, sure. That's a very good question. So I love questions. And so the first place to start, I think, is to love the question and to listen in ourselves for the place that we are challenged by, curious about, inspired by, you know, anything we could say that holds some energy for you, anything that holds some, you know, it pulls your attention to it. And then I think about good questions as being like incubation. You got to kind of sit on it, not sit on it to try to squish it, but sit on it like a chicken sits on their egg and is like, okay, what are you? I don't know. I don't know what you are, but I'm going to just sit on you. And there's some treasure inside this little round, hingeless box. And I don't know what it is, but if I just break it, I know it's not going to turn into a chick, right? It might turn into breakfast, but it's not going to turn into a chick. So I got to just sit on it and sit on it. And then it grows, and then it will start knocking from the inside if you pay attention to it that way. And that could happen very quickly. Sometimes gestation of something is like, boom, you know, and other times it's like years. But mostly it's a little bit of time. And then one of the things I love about the question is then when it starts to appear to us as a question, we can work with it that way. We can ask a teacher, we can ask Dharma brothers and sisters, we can ask our spouses, we can ask a tree, we can ask it in all kinds of different places. And as we ask it, and we don't just try to answer the question. This is really important. We don't want to just fill the hole, right? Once we come up with a neat answer, we've kind of like, the question can't breathe anymore. So what we want to do is we want to respond to the question through those processes. And then it takes life and it usually starts changing shape, a little like the Dragon Princess changing shape. You'll be all of a sudden, you thought your question was about this, and then boom, there'll be this other thing over here. And that's very reliable. But it takes a lot of trust of your own mind to stay, to stay with that. And then particularly, it's easier when the questions are feel like they lead towards something that's inspiring or really helpful. They're harder when the questions are leading to something that's more challenging, like either an insight I'm having about myself or about things that I'm unhappy about in my life or in my community or whatever. So it takes a kind of real care with those eggs, to stay connected to the ones that are more challenging.
So you can have more than one.
Oh yeah, definitely. Oh yeah. I mean, I would
Not
say,
like the question of your.
yeah, I think that's a mistake that we make, that we try to get to the. Actually, if there's a the, it's going to show up as a bunch of A's. That doesn't mean there's not a the, but the way to get at the is not to look for the question. It's just to pay attention to questions. And then when you come across those really big ones, they'll take you over and they'll become kind of the question, at least for the moment. But it's better not to make that happen. You don't need to sort through them so much as just sit on them and see which ones crack open. Yeah.
When I was in Vietnam and Cambodia, I noticed that no matter how poor the dwelling, there was always a spirit box on their property. And my friend asked what the significance of this was, and our guide looked at her like, he said, what's the significance of breathing, Could you explain so that I might be able to explain to her the significance of this box?
Every culture and every approach, have its own specificity about how it's talked about. But if we draw our attention to the word spirit, one way to think about spirit is that there are forces moving in the world that we can't exactly grasp. And I don't mean non-material forces. I mean that even material forces like rain and how things grow up from the earth and all of that. There's an energy that's moving through that is we can quantify if we decide to measure certain aspects of it, but the totality of it we can't really we can't grasp. And so we call it a spirit. And we make offerings to those spirits because they care for us. They can be treacherous, but they're also what nourish life. And so very traditional to be making offerings to those spirits in gratitude, but also I'm kind of asking them to show their favor on us. And for modern people, that can be a little challenging because we think in much more kind of rationalist material terms. But I usually invite people, you don't have to go all woo on everything. Just, like if you appreciate the earth, if you take a little something and you put it in a spirit altar and it's the earth spirit altar, it just reminds you that we don't understand all of this. We understand a lot and we can do a lot of things because we understand what we do, but it's not about even understanding and explaining. It's about appreciation and gratitude and generosity. And then that wheel becomes really powerful. What I found living in Japan, which is a culture of offerings, making offerings to spirit altars and other kinds of altars, it does cultivate a heart of generosity that's pretty beautiful. And we have our own ways here, but I think we could use a little more. We've been talking the past few years about, people have these free libraries, about making a little project at the temple to build little shrines. And people could put shrines in the front. Stay tuned for that.
Thank you.
Lauren? Oh, up right here. Yeah.
And so I've been feeling lately my life is very busy. It feels like every minute is booked, and it feels normal to me. And the people I encounter feel like a similar normal existence. And then I start thinking about the things that come in and out of my life, like the food I give the kids, the diapers I'm changing, and then each of them has like a history and reality of their own. And often, the more that I read about any given one of them, the more exploitative it feels. And I guess my question is, how do you get a sense of what is the reality that is kind of feeding your life, especially when you feel like you have no time?
You have no time. Yeah. Well, I would say two things about that. One is really, sit down with your husband and really think about how time can be made. And I know that's not always possible, and it's super not easy, but we just have to get better at that. We've created a structure in our life that is really kind of very unsustainable with the amount that we're expecting from ourselves, and especially in terms of the way time works. So I know you guys do that, continue to do that, and like the solution isn't only internal, because sometimes what happens when we take up a spiritual practice, we think that some kind of form of the spiritual practice will miraculously change that. In the same way that we have to be really careful about talking about spiritual practice replacing the kind of work we need to do to have better labor laws and the kind of things that we need in our society to be able to have the lives that we want. So that is a kind of caveat. There's a spaciousness inside every activity. So if you take changing diapers, for example, so that moment when you lay them on their back and their belly is kind of plump and it's like this, and you're removing the diaper and they may start squirm, and so you got to be right on your game, because it might turn into a lot of extra work that is not very fun work. It's like right at that moment there, that's all there is, actually. That's it. And any thought we have about it, any evaluation, anything can be dropped. It is just the immediacy of what it is. It's your caring hands meeting a being you're touching that is touching you back. And there is something that needs to be done that is done. When we focus in that place, which changing diapers is a relatively easy place to do it, when it's more like the kind of work that you do that's very like you've got to take care of tons of people and data and all that sort of stuff, it's harder to find that place because you're holding so many things in your mind at once. But it is possible there too. I'm just using that example because it's simpler. So it's like dropping off all of the extra, particularly evaluation. Evaluation's super important, but it's better done stepping back, having a cup of coffee, thinking about it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, a half hour, an hour, however long, and make the evaluation also just a thing. But while we're doing it and we're trying to evaluate it, usually it throws us so far off track. And what I mean by evaluation is kind of judgment of good or bad, or okay or not okay, or all those kinds of things. So that's where I'd point you, is that kind of concentration. And we practice it in meditation, but then we get a little sidetracked because the meditation can be so like, oh, great, I got a few minutes to myself and then I got to do something. Well, the way you meditate, the same intention you bring in terms of just direct presence, we bring that to the activity. And don't worry about if the quality of my mind is like it was in the meditation. It's not going to be, because there's a billion things going on. Yeah. I got really trained when I was a middle school teacher, and with ridiculous numbers of students in a class, like 35. And I was bringing this up because I imagine you can identify with it when there's like 78 things going around you at once, and then you start growing eyes in the back of your head. You can kind of do that. That there is a real sweet spot there if you embrace the pandemonium, and that's what I mean by losing the evaluation. You don't go like, oh my God, I can't believe it's like this. You just go, and then you just go into mode looking for that, just meet. And then you sit down and you go, man, I don't know if I can be a middle school teacher anymore. or how can I get better at it, or like what in this I don't like this and I do like this, and all those sorts of things.
First of all,
Yeah.
but also, I just wanted to ask if you could speak on like the significance of taking precepts.
Yeah. So receiving precepts is a gateway to receiving the Buddha mind through the lineage of ancestors that have come up into today. So we look at the face of the precepts, they're guidelines for living, but they're not just guidelines like a set of rules that we have to maintain. They're guidelines that are giving us an opportunity. They're like presenting us an opportunity of how to live out the Buddha mind with our life. So when we develop a connection with, or we receive through that lineage the precepts, is a kind of empowerment. Empowerment meaning that there's a karmic connection that is revealed, and then we can rely on it. And it helps us to then carry out our life through that Buddha mind, finding the significance through our life. And in this tradition, it's how we practice it at Buddhai Temple. When people receive the precepts, they sew a Buddha's robe. So people who are wearing these kind of bib-looking things, they're not bags. They're the smallest version in our school of the Buddha's robe. And so we wrap our body in that. We receive the body of Buddha through receiving the robe of the Buddha. In a very technical sense, we say there's no two Buddha's robes. There's only one Buddha's robe. And we just keep sewing it over and over and over and over and over again. And so it's like we're all wrapped in that robe. That's what it means to, we wrap our body, we wrap our Buddha body, our Buddha nature in the robe of the Buddha. And then we live out that life. We also receive a Dharma name. So I think when people come for the first time, sometimes it's a little strange because all these people say, why do you give everyone Japanese names? Well, they're not exactly Japanese names. Like they don't sound normal to Japanese people. Okay? They're Buddhist names that are given through using Chinese characters, which is a very ancient way to make Dharma names. So they're not just like Japanese names, but they sound a little funny in English. There's some temples who have gone to giving English names. So like I know one priest whose name is Dharma Joy. That's really beautiful. They tend to be a lot of syllables, like compared to Anyu. They tend to be a lot more syllables when it goes into English, but we're still keeping with the Chinese character. There's such a rich, there's a lot present in using the Chinese characters, so that's why we do that. And then you're taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And so there is then the refuge, which is formally taken and is ritually engaged. So it's an opportunity for us to rely more deeply in that way. What I really like to emphasize for people too is it's not necessary to receive precepts or formally or ritually take the refuge to be a Buddhist or to be welcome at everything at this temple and other temples, and to practice. It's not the kind of thing like, well, if you don't do this, you're not really, and if you do it, you really are. It's just way beyond that kind of narrow-minded way of thinking about things. It is just a gift, and some of us will feel called to receive that gift, and some won't, and that's not a problem. Okay, we have time for one more if anyone's got anything. Hi.
So I have a problem. Whenever I do
Only one?
the problem.
Okay, great.
So I need the answer. When I sit zazen, that's when I have my best thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard not to be like, yes, I have a great thought.
Yeah.
How do I stop that?
Well, why is it a problem?
Well, it's awesome for like I've solved the problem. Like, oh yeah, I know how I'm gonna reseed my lawn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, I have a couple of suggestions. One is you can sit longer. And then if you sit longer, then oftentimes that will calm down a little bit and you run out of stuff to, I mean, I don't know about if you'll run out of stuff to think about though. Your mind works pretty fast. And so, you know, if it is shorter time though, oftentimes it's just like, well, okay, I might be thinking about this if I was driving to work or something, but I'm sitting meditation. And so I'll just think about it then. And you can consciously remind yourself like, okay, that's not what I'm here to do. And just kind of turn your intention. That only goes so far, is when you turn your intention like that. But it is important. If we're not doing that, then we are likely to sit down. And I did a lot of lesson planning when I was a school teacher sitting zazen. Because like I had, class was starting in 3 hours, you know, and I wasn't exactly ready. And so, you know, oh, I have an hour and a half. But if you can't write it down, it's hard to remember. So we have to kind of consciously make that decision. And then I would say that while you're sitting in meditation, once you realize the kind of problematic quality of that it's just compulsive, I'm not choosing to do it. It's just something I can't stop doing. You got to really taste that. Taste the quality of the compulsion. Like just know, oh, I'm addicted to this. I'm addicted to solving the problem. And I'm just going to keep doing it. And the problem's not going to actually get solved. Many problems will get solved, but the problem won't. And so when you drink more deeply of it, you can feel in your body and in your mind, in your heart, in your breath, feel for the contraction that is turning into that thought. Because it doesn't just happen. There's a process that's ongoing. I'm not saying that you make it happen. I might say that in some circumstances, but right now I'm not going to say you're making it happen. But so you don't have to worry about that, but just feel for the process that's unfolding. And you'll start seeing like, oh, what's my breath doing? Maybe I'm sitting here for a couple minutes and I'm like, okay, I'm okay with this. I'm kind of chilling out. And then your breath starts going, wait a minute. I'm not comfortable with this amount of space. And then your breath will start pumping a little bit. And then your mind will start curling around something and grabbing on. So as you get more intimate with that, when you feel that, you can take the practice. This is a very simple practice. Take the thought and think of it just like a flower or a leaf, something that's beautiful. It's not a problem, but you're just setting it in like a river. And you could literally imagine that. You could create the image in your mind and then just let it be the feeling. You're not getting rid of the thought. You're not like pushing it away. You're just kind of setting it in a stream and letting it flow, setting it in a stream and letting it flow by. And that's actually a very difficult practice. And it's very direct. It sounds kind of like, oh, that's a super simple meditation. Well, it is very simple, but it takes a kind of very precise effort to be able to keep doing that again and again. And as you let it float away, again, let your attention rest in your body and your breath. And just keep doing that. That's not going to solve the problem. It's going to bring you very more intimate with the problem. And that's where possibility for transformation.